Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community, for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. There is something I want you to sit with before we get into today's episode. Think about the last time someone ignored you. Not a stranger, someone whose opinion of you actually mattered. Could be a supervisor. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was a colleague that you respected. You sent something. Maybe it was a document, an email, a question that required an answer and nothing came back. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. And here is what your brain did next. It started working against you, actually. It constructed excuses on that person's behalf. They are probably slammed. They have bigger things to deal with. Their inbox is a disaster. And maybe all of that was true. But there was something else. There was another part of your brain, the logical part, the part that knows how the world actually works, that kept asking a question it could not let go of. Would it really have taken more than a minute to say they'd get back to me? That's the tension this episode is all about. And if you are a leader, I need you to stay with me here because what I am about to tell you matters. Look, we are wired for human contact. This is not a soft observation. It is biology, and it is something deeper than biology. It is what defines us as a human species. When we reach out to another person, when we ask a question or submit work or send a message, we are not looking for validation. We are not looking for an attaboy. We are making an authentic request to be seen and to be heard as a human. Why? Because that is a fundamentally human act. It is what separates us from every other species on the planet. It is what makes community possible, what makes teams possible, and what makes leadership possible at all. Think about the way most people ask, "How are you?" You know, that question has become a reflex. It's become a placeholder. It's like the uhs and the ums. We're filling the space because the answer almost always is, "Great, how are you?" And then the conversation moves on before anyone meant the question or expected a real answer. But I'd like you to try something different. Because when I ask someone how they are doing, I slow it down. I'm intentional about my tone and my pitch. I mean the question because I actually want to know, how are you doing? There's a difference between going through the motions of human connection and actually deciding to be intentional and choose it. Because that choice is visible to people. Its absence is equally as visible too. Now, bring that into your workspace, okay? So you're at work, you're in your office, and someone on your team sends you a request. Maybe there's a memo they worked on for 2 days. Maybe there's a question about a project that is sitting between them and their ability to move forward. Maybe it is something that feels small to you, given everything on your plate. They send it, and you do not respond. So now, let's try an experiment. I want you to imagine that exchange that I just talked about happening in person, in real life. Picture yourself standing in your office. Your team member walks in and literally hands you that memo. It is physically in your hands. And you do not look up. You do not acknowledge them. They are 12 inches from your face and you act as though they are not there. I want to ask you a question. How is ignoring someone on email any different than that? I'd argue there's no meaningful distinction. The medium, yes, the medium is different. The impact, though, is identical. When you leave a question unanswered, when you ignore the work someone put in, you are telling that person something, and it's not with your words. It is with silence. And silence communicates very, very loudly. Look, being overwhelmed is real. Nobody is disputing that. But being overwhelmed does not transfer the cost of your silence to someone else's nervous system any less. Because a 90-second reply that says, I have this, and I have not forgotten you, I'll get back to you by Thursday, is not a productivity hack. It is a basic act of human decency. I talked about this principle in episode 37, the leadership of I got this. Telling someone I got this is not just reassurance, it is a leadership act. It signals that you see them, that you are carrying the weight with them, that they are not alone. The same principle applies here. The question is not whether you have time. The question is whether you understand what your silence is actually costing you. And if you want to go back even further in the archive, I did an episode in episode 35. It was called Why Workplace Civility Training Misses the Point, where I made a simple argument that did not require a framework or a research study to prove. And I said in that episode, and it's worth repeating now, just be a decent human. That episode got more response than almost anything I had written at that point because people know. They already know. The problem is not awareness. The problem is that the pressure of leadership makes it easy to forget that the person on the other end of that unanswered email is a human being making an authentic request to exist in your world. So let's talk a little bit more about what the silence is actually doing. And here's what the research says. And I want you to hear this clearly because this is not about feelings. This is actually documented science. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA has spent years studying what happens in the brain when a person experiences social rejection or exclusion. Now, what her research found quite plainly is that being ignored activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Isn't that incredible? The region of the brain that processes the distress of physical pain lights up in the same way when someone is socially excluded. So your team member is not being dramatic. Their brain is registering genuine harm. What you have done is triggered a physiological pain response in your team member. Now, layer that on top of the work that we have talked about many times here at the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. Dr. Amy Edmondson at Harvard, whose research on psychological safety has become one of the most cited bodies of work in organizational behavior. I've referenced her before across several episodes, including episode 39, The Leadership Flywheel, and episode 45, Guardrails, Not Perfection, because her work keeps showing up wherever leadership intersects with human performance. What Edmondson's research consistently shows is that one of the strongest predictors of whether a team will take risks, ask honest questions, and tell leadership the truth is leader responsiveness. Isn't that something? Not praise, not agreement, it's responsiveness. When you go dark, you are not just being slow. You are literally dismantling the conditions under which your team will do their best work and be honest with you about what is actually happening inside your organization. That has a business cost you can measure. Now, the environment your team is already living in, reduction in force is not a rare event right now. It is a weekly headline. Your team members are reading the same news that you are. They are constantly pattern matching, looking for signals about their own security. And when their manager stops responding, that silence does not register as, oh, she's just swamped. It might register as, I might be next. You are not just leaving a message unanswered. You are feeding a narrative you do not even realize is being written in a climate where that narrative can cost you the best people. This is what I am calling the silent tax. When you go dark, you do not eliminate the weight of an unanswered request. You transfer it, right? It literally moves off of your plate and onto your team members' nervous system. They carry it through meetings. They carry it home. They carry it into conversations with their own families on a Tuesday night when they should be present somewhere else entirely. The burden does not disappear. It just changes hands, and the tax compounds with every day that passes without your reply. The mental health cost of chronic unresponsiveness from a leader is not abstract. It erodes a person's sense of safety at work. It chips away at their belief that someone has their back, that they are protected, that they matter to the person above them. This is not about validation at all. This is about telling someone they did a great job on their memo. This is about the baseline human signal that says, I see you. I hear you. You do exist in my world, and at a bare minimum, if you cannot reply in substance, acknowledge, because that acknowledgement is everything. Now, I want to stay in the evidence for one more moment before I tell you what a responsive leader actually does, because the business case here is not soft, and I do not want you to move past it without sitting with it fully. Gallup's research on voluntary employee turnover is consistent across years of data and thousands of organizations. The number one driver of people leaving their jobs is not compensation. It is not benefits. It is not even the work itself. It is the relationship with the direct manager. I've been saying this for years. People don't leave companies, they leave their managers. They stay for their managers. And chronic unresponsiveness is one of the clearest signals a team member can receive that they do not matter to the person who is supposed to be leading them. Chronic unresponsiveness is the clearest signal a team member can receive that they do not matter to the person who is supposed to be leading them. That is so critical. So here's what makes this particularly painful. By the time someone hands in their notice, the damage is already done. The silence already did its work weeks or months before that resignation letter. The conversation that you never had, the reply you never sent, the acknowledgement that never came. They made their decision in that space. You never knew a conversation was needed because you never knew the silence had become a verdict. Now, I want to be clear about something else, because I talked about a version of this in episode 49, More Than a Paycheck, where I made the case that team identity is built in the small moments and not the large ones. The same logic applies here. Trust is built or broken in the small moments. An unanswered email is a small moment. So is a 90-second reply. And the difference between those two small moments is the difference between a team member who stays and one who's already updating their resume. And in episode 30, Why Servant Leadership is the Most Powerful Leadership Style for Today's Workforce, I made the argument that your job as a leader is to serve your team, not the other way around. Servant leadership is not a philosophy you adopt in annual reviews and town halls. It is a daily practice. It shows up whether you respond. It shows up in whether the people working for you believe at a fundamental level that you have their back. Look, without your team, you do not have a job. And that is not supposed to be a motivational line. That is a fact. And a leader who goes dark on their team is, whether they intend to or not, communicating the opposite. Going dark is not just a communication failure. Inside the golden leadership cycle that I created, what we are really talking about here is an empowerment failure at its core. Empowerment requires two inputs: psychological safety and the belief that you matter to the person leading you. When you go dark, you remove both. And if you follow that logic further, the silent tax that I've been referring to does not just damage empowerment. It undermines resilience by eroding the trust required to recover from setbacks, and it kills the conditions that reinvention needs to take root. You cannot build a team that grows, adapts, and takes risks if they do not believe you are in their corner. Now, I want to address something directly because some of you listened to episode 48, The Leadership of Silence, and you're wondering whether I'm now contradicting myself on the issue of silence. And I am not. Intentional silence is a leadership tool. Choosing not to fill every room with your voice. Creating space for your team to lead. Resisting the urge to have the last word. That's a deliberate act in service to the people around you. What we are talking about today is different. Inadvertent silence is a leadership failure. Not because you are a bad person, but because the impact does not care about your intentions. The distinction here is worth naming clearly. Intentional silence is something you are doing for someone. Inadvertent silence is something happening to them. One is a strategy and the other is that tax. So a responsive leader does not have a perfect inbox. That is not the standard, and I'm not asking you to be available for everything immediately. The standard is acknowledgement. It is the habit of closing loops, even briefly, so that the people on your team know they have not been forgotten. A single reply that says, I see this. I am working through a lot right now, and I will have something substantive for you by the end of the week. That takes less than a minute to write. And what it gives back is immeasurable. It signals you exist. You matter. I have not abandoned you. Think about how you ask, how are you, to the people on your team. Do you mean it? Do you slow it down? Are you choosing the connection or just going through the motions? Because your team can tell the difference. They've always been able to tell the difference. The leader who genuinely means it when they ask, who is intentional about their tone and their presence, who treats a simple question as an actual question, that leader is building something that no amount of compensation or benefits can replicate. Because they are building a reason to stay. So here's the audit I want to leave you with. And I want you to sit with these questions honestly. And I mean actually sit with these questions, not just read past them. Who on your team is currently carrying the weight of your non-response? Where have you gone dark without realizing it? What story is being written about you right now in the silence you have not noticed? And what would it cost you in actual minutes to close that loop today? You do not have to be available for everything, but you do have to acknowledge the people who work for you, not because a leadership book told you to do it, because they are human beings making an authentic request to be seen and to be heard. And friends, that is not a leadership standard. That is a human one. So I want to close with a very specific 3-part challenge or a set of reflection questions for all of you. Number 1 is the audit. Look at your sent items from the last 48 hours. Who is still waiting for a simple received note? Number 2, the 90-second rule. Reply now, not with the answer, but with the acknowledgement. And number 3, the reflection. What would it cost you in actual minutes to make sure that nobody on your team goes to bed tonight still waiting on you? Because remember, Leadership, it isn't about perfection, it is about progress. So take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.